Welcome back to Director's Choice. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is home to some of the world's most iconic superheroes, and their backstories tend to be even more impressive thanks to the depths of their characters. One Marvel hero that has maintained relevance across different plots in the MCU, plus his very own 2016 movie, is Doctor Strange. In this episode of Director's Choice, we're going to peel back the multi-layers of Doctor Strange's character to uncover the psychology behind his personality and how his life experiences may have influenced the persona he maintains.
It is Doctor Strange, not Master Strange, not Mr. Strange, Doctor Strange.
The neurosurgeon turned sorcerer supreme is a magic-wielding superhero who had to go on an extreme learning curve to find himself, and the journey was anything but fun. Here's the breakdown of Doctor Strange's psychology. Stephen Vincent Strange was a young boy with the big dreams of practicing medicine, but as all good superhero stories go, his dreams were met with obstacles he couldn't have imagined. On the path to becoming a doctor, Stephen lost his mother, and shortly after, his younger brother died. And in a lot of ways, which we will discuss later on, this affirmed his rather warped perspective of life. Nonetheless, Stephen was exceptionally brilliant and studious, and his hard work and commitment to education paid off as he quickly became a neurosurgeon and became Doctor Strange. But the character actualizing this name was yet to be born. Notably, one of the most complex branches in medicine, Doctor Strange excelled at neurosurgery and was widely celebrated, and he loved it. He was very successful and very proud of his successes, going as far as selecting only cases of patients that he knew he had a guaranteed shot at great surgical outcomes. However, his success in the medical field wasn't to last forever. An accident in his car, which was one of his most beloved possessions, nearly cost Doctor Strange his life. But it cost him the very reason he lived and had a living. After being treated by another exceptional surgeon, Doctor Strange managed to recover from his accident injuries, albeit in a way that he would never have wanted. He lost the use of his hands. For someone who prided himself on what his hands could do in the surgical theater, Stephen Strange lost the very things that made him a surgeon. And that began the start of a downward trajectory that would eventually lead the neurosurgeon to his path to becoming the Sorcerer Supreme as he headed to Kamartaj in Kathmandu in search of hope, a feeling that was foreign to him. The events that occurred in the early stages of Stephen Strange's life weren't fully explored in the movies, but fans of the comic books know that he lost his mother and rarely recovered from the grief because he simply refused to deal with it. Although he couldn't save his mother, Stephen Strange never wanted to be in a position where someone needed saving and he couldn't be of help. And while this may have very well formed the basis for his eventual heroism, it also drove him to be a perfectionist of sorts. Anything he did, he had to do it the best. Anything he had, it had to be the best. And he didn't leave room for normalcy or mediocrity in his everyday life, especially not in his work. Despite how troubling this can be to develop in one's mental profile, it was the main reason for his success as a neurosurgeon. But that level of internalized grief, which was compounded by the loss of his younger brother and later on his father, and the overwhelming sense of guilt he felt, made it more difficult for Stephen Strange to form a personal connection to anyone or anything, least of all his work. Doctor Strange saw his success as the sole purpose of his life, and work was highly impersonal to him because he never considered or left room for failure. Which is the main reason for his distraught and aggravated helplessness when the accident cost him his hands, which were his most prized possessions. Stephen Strange is very set in his ways and would readily refuse any idea that contradicts what he knows or can prove to be true.
Right. Forget everything I think I know. Sorry.
Doctor Strange's sense of perfectionism remained evident even during his training to become a sorcerer and master of the mystic arts. He faced Dormammu time and again to ensure that he completed his training perfectly. Later on, when he becomes associated with Spider-Man and the Avengers, his perfectionist tendencies are still highlighted and evident as he tries to maintain order and restore balance as often as possible.
Parker, don't you realize that in the multiverse there are an infinite number of people who know Peter Parker is Spider-Man?
In his attempts to run away from the grief and pain he felt, Doctor Strange became someone with a penchant for perfection that bordered on extremes. And he almost lost his humanity in the course. Long before the accident that changed his life, Doctor Strange's idea of the world was limited only to things that affected him and how things made him feel. His ego was of unimaginable size, as he prided himself on knowing everything there was to know about anything, just to be able to brag about it to his coworkers.
You can't do it freehand.
I can and I will.
This isn't a time for showing off, Strange.
How about 10 minutes ago when you called the wrong time of death?
Despite being diligent in his work, saving lives wasn't the first thing on Doctor Strange's mind while he was doing medical research and breaking new grounds. Doctor Strange wanted to be recognized by the world, and he was particularly delighted in going to award shows alone and for none other than himself. He collects awards and displays them brightly and obnoxiously in his home.
Why are you doing this to me?
To show you just how much you don't know.
As a matter of fact, the majority of his character arc is spent trying to redeem his human core from the extremes of narcissism. His ego stood in the way of a lot of things, like his healing and eventual sorcery training in Camartage, because he was so hung up on his own intellect and doing things the way he thought they ought to be done. Throughout his journey to becoming the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange had to learn that there was more than one way to do things, and he had to consider more than just the rational or logical options, because there were other people and feelings involved.
There is no such thing as spirit. We are made of matter and nothing more.
Although Doctor Strange was nowhere close to being a villain, his redemption arc is part of his character that truly shows the positive progression in his psychology. After plaguing himself with the burden of perfection for so long, Stephen Strange had to be reflective to find the truth of himself beneath all the layers of toxicity. While some people believe that the astral trip the Ancient One sent Doctor Strange on was the first point of his redemption, some other arguments suggest otherwise. Regardless, the important point that the Ancient One ceaselessly imparted on Doctor Strange is that the answer and strength for any situation may exist within oneself, but the use of such powers should always benefit others. Doctor Strange did a lot of soul-searching, and he applied himself to find a renewed sense of selflessness, accompanied by self-improvement and good intentions. Although he still shows his innate perfectionist approach in solving problems or defeating enemies as a superhero, he still maintains his newfound foundation of thought. No narcissism, no egos, just pure goodness.
Because I'm not a killer?
These zealots will snuff us all out, and you can't muster the strength to snuff them first?
What do you think I just did?
You saved your own life!
Doctor Strange bears the great responsibility of saving the world and existing across a multiverse, and so his perspective of the world is already unlike that of most people. But just as he commits to everything else in life, Doctor Strange was wholly committed to the process of losing his hedonistic and narcissistic tendencies. Although hints of his perfectionism still peek out beneath the more mature, more empathetic personality he now has in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Doctor Strange is no longer the same person he was when all that was associated with his identity was his exceptional knowledge and capabilities as a neurosurgeon. People that have experienced grief and suffer internalized guilt like Doctor Strange may find themselves lashing out at the world by over or underperforming, but ultimately, it's important to understand that grieving is human and vulnerability can be a strength. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us on the breakdown of Doctor Strange's psychology. Take a moment to look at this other recent clip by Director's Choice, and be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that bright notification bell to get alerts for our latest videos.